Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Really good, really good. We're getting close. Well, we are in May now. We see a lot of memes right now with it's going to be May with Justin Timberlake. And then also, too, May the 4th be with you, Caroline, because everybody's talking about Star Wars. And right now, we've got the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi this year. We've got, of course, probably the biggest reason why we're doing today's episode all about Star Wars is that we had Darth Vader win our Best Villain March Madness competition this year. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to chat all about Star Wars today. And Caroline, I don't know if I've even really mentioned Star Wars much on the show. It's funny, for a podcast that talks a lot about pop culture, Star Wars has never really come up that much. And I don't know, Caroline, whether or not you're necessarily a Star Wars fan, but I'll be curious to get your thoughts today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts as well and your perspective on the pop culture thing that is Star Wars. And we might talk about this a little bit later. I think we may have touched on it briefly when we introduced March Madness back in February, but Darth Vader almost didn't even make the cut for March Madness.
Yeah, we will definitely be discussing that later. And we actually have a guest joining us today. She is a friend of the show and also a big Star Wars fan, I came to find out. So we want to welcome back to the show Holly Arnason. She's the associate manager of the Makerspace. And Holly was actually last on, I believe, for our Freaky Friday episode in November of 2021. So, Holly, it's been way too long. Welcome back to Overdue Finds. How are you today?
Thanks, Bryce and Caroline. I'm great, and it's really great to be here with you on the podcast again, especially on such an awesome sci-fi, universe, really, that there's so much to explore and discuss. So very excited to speak with you today.
With this, I believe it, I sometimes take on the role of the official Overdue Finds records keeper. Sometimes that feels like just too heavy of a mantle to bear. But I think this might actually be your 5th time on the show.
That could be. I definitely am very proud. I believe this has come up on the podcast before, but I'm a guest who appeared in the first 10 ever Overdue Finds episodes. I'm very proud of that, and I tell that to new librarians when they get started, just to let them know how important I am. And it's
You have a longer history with the podcast than I do.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
So it's been great. I've been a huge fan of the podcast over the years too, and I've loved a lot of your episodes. And it's always fun to come on Overdue Finds. And I did love that Freaky Friday episode.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, it's so funny because we do so many episodes, and not to say I forgot that we did that episode, but it's just because I think we do so many of them, you just kind of you move on, you do one, you move on to the next one, and you're just oh yeah, it kind of, when I saw in my notes about the Freaky Friday episodes, yeah, that was a fun episode. I like that one.
Really? I think about that one all the time. Maybe that says more about me and my, I'm constantly on the lookout for potential body swap situations. But, that was a really fun one. And Holly, as you know, I'm a big fan of yours. So, here, I think we're going to have, a really good conversation today. I can't wait to find out what you think of Star Wars, your history with it, Bryce's history. I'm just excited.
Yeah, and speaking of excited, so Caroline, of course, our last episode was on the new CTV comedy Shelved, which is if you didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, it's a new sitcom about a fictional Toronto public library. So naturally, we had to talk about it on the podcast. So the episode was released a couple of weeks ago. We tweeted about it and everything, obviously through our EPL channels. And it was really cool to see that Anthony Q. Farrell, who created the show, is the showrunner. He wrote some episodes of The Office. He kind of retweeted us. And he said, it's funny, in his retweet, he says, "I think the sound of library workers giggling about the different moments from Shelved is my new favorite thing." So, which is awesome. And it's funny because I saw that and I sent him a note back saying, thank you so much for listening. And he replied back with, "It was a dream. Thank you for breaking it down. I love getting feedback from the people who live that life every day." So I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. I'm like not literally, okay? I'm not literally floating in my chair right now, but I'm figuratively floating.
Yeah, it's really cool to, I know he's a busy person and just to kind of know somebody who's working on this show, took their time to listen to it and hear us break down their show and all the hard work that they do. So I know they just recently aired their season finale, so hopefully it's back for season 2. And it's, if you haven't had a chance, please go check out Shelved. It's a really fun show.
Yeah.
All right, so time for Overdue Finds picks. Holly, it's been way too long since you've been on the show. What have you been enjoying lately?
Well, recently I've been enjoying a reread, or I guess a re-listen, that I really love from our collection. And it's an adventure story. It's a fantasy adventure story, but I think for Star Wars fans, there's actually a lot to potentially dig into with this one. This is Sabriel by Garth Nix. And it's a coming-of-age fantasy adventure story about a teen necromancer named Sabriel, who stumbles into this like huge conflict with this ancient enemy, kind of like Darth Vader vibes. And it's set in this old kingdom, basically, where there's a lot of magic. Sabriel is unwillingly taken on the job of her father, which is actually an official title called the Abhorsen. And the Abhorsen's job is the Abhorsen is a special necromancer, not an evil one. Sorry to all of the evil necromancers out there. I hope none of your listeners are evil necromancers, but the Abhorsen is basically supposed to deal with these evil necromancers, make sure that the dead stay dead, and don't terrorize the people of the Old Kingdom. One of the things that I really love about this story is that the Abhorsen has a special set of bells that she uses for her work. And she uses them. She can go into death itself, like the place. There's 9 gates. She can investigate things. She can fight free magic creatures. And the bells themselves are kind of like a character in the story. So they each have different abilities and descriptions, and she wears them in a bandolier. I guess a little bit of a lightsaber vibe to that, in the sense of a special tool that she can use. So there's, for example, Rana, the sleeper bell. It's small and slow with a sweet sound, and it puts people to sleep. And then there's Mosrael, the waker bell, and it's rowdy and it wakes people up, but also sends the Abhorsen into death. And so it's a really fun adventure story. There's companions. There's a really great cat companion named Mogget. And one of the reasons why I really want your listeners to know about this is that EPL has an audiobook in the collection, both I think it's downloadable, and it's narrated by actor Tim Curry, and it's such an incredible performance. Especially his Mogget, the cat, is just incredible. So I would really recommend people check out Sabriel if you haven't run across it before.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that title before, but hopefully the necromancers who listen to this show weren't too offended by your comments there. But is it like a franchise? Is there more than one book in the series, or? Yeah,
there's a couple of I think there's maybe 3 or 4 books in this series. I particularly love the first 2. The second one is also narrated by Tim Curry for the audiobook, which is really amazing. And it's about Lyriel, who's a cousin of Sabriel, and it ends up taking on some of the aspects of the Abhorsen and the whole fight against evil and keeping the dead dead and that kind of thing. And there's a great character in that one too. A disreputable dog is the name of the character, and this is Lyriel's companion. So it's a fun little series, and the books are I think they're a really great quick read in a way. Like they're really, really well paced, and again, I cannot stress enough how good the Tim Curry narration is.
All right, there we go. Caroline, how about you? Do you have any last time?
Yes.
You recommended Center Stage, and I loved your review of it. Do you have any other early 2000s, maybe romantic drama comedies that you can recommend this week?
I'm sure there are, but I wanted to go in a bit of a different direction today. So my pick is a book. I don't know, I can't speak to the audiobook, so I don't know how the narration works out there, but it's a newer release called Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. And it's one of my thriller, mystery, whodunit type books. And the plot for this one centers around a dysfunctional family that gathers at their gathers to celebrate their eccentric grandmother's birthday. Now, she lives in this little cottage that is separated from the mainland by a causeway, and every so often the tide will come in and cut off the cottage from the rest of the world. So there's that, sense of remoteness, of being alone, of being trapped in there. So the family all comes together. Many of them haven't seen each other or talked in quite a long time. They arrive, they celebrate, she reveals she's made some changes to the will, and then they all go to sleep. And then by morning, one or more of them will be dead. It grabbed me. It definitely, I was hooked. I loved the idea of it. It's like Agatha Christie, particularly, and Then There Were None meets The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which is another one about a remote island situation, meets blank. And this is where if we had the sound effects, it would be meets bleep, and I would get bleeped out because I can't tell you what this third one is because it gives it away. But once you've read the book, you'll know really what my bleep is on there. So it hooked me. I was reading it in the middle. There's a few points where I was just like, wow, this night is really long. There's a lot going on in this. But then as it picks up towards the end, it met my criteria for having twists that I expected, because those allow me to go, well, I saw that coming, and then feel really proud about myself, as well as twists that I didn't see coming, and then it made me want to start reading the book over again with that information and see just how everything was plotted out. So I recommend Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney.
Well, based on some of those similar titles that you've recommended in the past, if there's one thing that, a little bit of advice, if you're gathering with friends or family on a remote island somewhere, don't let them know you're changing your will. Just maybe keep that to yourself. Wait till maybe you get home. Send them an email. Maybe, or a phone call.
Thanks for coming.
Exactly.
By the way, also, the will's changed.
I'm now getting all the money. Thank you for joining me. Yeah.
Yeah. It just seems like just a totally different style of life where people would have parties to announce that they've changed their wills. Can you imagine? My family has never done that as far as I know. Maybe they're not inviting me, but yeah.
Well, it sounds like a great book anyway.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And again, if anyone's listened to the audiobook, we'd love to know how the narration was in that. So, Bryce, what's your Overdue Find this week?
Yeah, so my pick this week is actually a show that a lot of people have been talking about lately, since it's now in its fourth and final season on HBO. My pick this week is the show Succession, which you can actually borrow the first 3 seasons from us on DVD. I just started watching it, and I'm hooked. I just finishing up the first season now, so which is kind of nice because now I've got another 3 seasons to enjoy here. So if you've maybe heard of Succession, but you're not too familiar with it, it actually follows the dysfunctional Roy family who own a fictional media company, which you could definitely make some comparisons to say, Fox or Disney. Actor Brian Cox plays Logan Roy, who started this media conglomerate, and it follows his children who are all vying to take over their company since their dad is getting older and will, in theory, hopefully be stepping down at some point. The show has got some amazing one-liners, and I would definitely consider it. It's funny because it's promoted as a drama, but I would actually say it's more of a dark comedy than a drama. It's just very kind of dry, and just some of the things that the characters do, it'll leave you kind of shaking your head and laughing about it. The rest of the cast includes the great Kieran Culkin, Jeremy Strong, Sarah Snook, and Alan Ruck, who play members of the Roy family who are all trying to kind of scheme and get their father's approval. So if you're a fan of anti-heroes, you'll enjoy Succession. So it's also one of those things too where I know a lot of people will see this and be like, oh, why do I want to watch some show about some super rich billionaire running this evil media company? And trust me, you will enjoy it.
When Caroline was mentioning somebody holding a party to announce changes to their will, I've only watched a couple of episodes of Succession, but I thought of Succession in that moment. So this is a very cool cool incidence where you've now recommended it on the heels of that, Bryce. That's fun.
Yeah. All right. So today, of course, we're chatting all about Star Wars. I'm so excited to get everybody's thoughts here. I mean, I don't think we need to do too much of a background into Star Wars in general. I think everybody kind of knows what Star Wars is, but I'm more curious, Holly, I'm going to start with you. I guess, what's your history with Star Wars? Do you remember when you first watched it? Have you been a fan your whole life?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is I've been a fan my whole life. I checked in with the family. I got the family group chat going about this. When did I first watch Star Wars? Nobody could really remember when I first saw it, and my brother remembers seeing it very young. So it must have been very early. One of the memories that came up from this question was my brother remembers that we had the non-special VHS edition of the movies. And at the beginning of them, there was an interview always with film critic Leonard Moulton and George Lucas. And my brother and I were quite young at the time. And so apparently this would frequently trigger me to do a George Lucas impression. I won't try to recreate that here on the podcast today. But we were a bit young maybe to appreciate it. And we often fast forwarded through these interviews to get to the movie. So yeah, that was one great memory that came up. Another one is, again, with my brother, Robin, our grandmother actually took Robin and I to the movies when they were re-released in theaters with a special edition. And my brother was quite young at the time. And I just remember him being so excited and, having toys. And our grandmother was not a sci-fi fan. She was not even really a huge fiction fan, and more of a newspaper magazine, nonfiction reader. But she was so happy to take us to that because we were so excited about it. So yeah, those are just a couple of early memories. I think it's always been around in my house, and we've always been reading books, playing video games and everything too. So it's definitely been a big part of my life.
Yeah, I remember too when they re-released the trilogy. I think that was in 97, because I'm pretty sure I was in in grade 12 at that time. And I remember going with my friends, and we were all super excited as well to finally get to see Star Wars on the big screen, because when they originally came out, we were little too young to see it anyway. But Caroline, though, I mentioned at the top, I haven't really heard you talk too much besides, like, I do know you're a big Star Trek The Next Generation fan, so that I know about you. Yes. But what about Star Wars? Are you a Star Wars fan? Is that something you really grew up watching too?
Yes and no. I'm going to start my story by taking you to the Ontario Educational Leadership Centre, which was a week-long course, or like week-long kind of camp experience that students who had maybe leadership potential were nominated by their elementary school. I think it was for kids in grade 6 or 7, so 11, 12 in there. I was there in the mid-90s, and even though we were all there for various arts type reasons, it culminated in a sports day, because I guess all artsy leadership kids love sports days. Anyway,
sports. Yeah.
The sports day was Star Wars themed, and like the counselors, who were high school students, were all dressed up as like Star Wars characters. The team names were like related to Star Wars. And at this point, I had not seen the movie, but I definitely like knew enough of a cultural awareness of it to get most of it. But my main takeaway from this was, like, when I went home, I was like, okay, I think I have to watch this. I think this has surfaced a gap that I need to address. So we borrowed the VHSs from a family friend whose family had them, like many families would. Mine did not. And I watched them, and they were enjoyable. I think my next Star Wars like plot point in my life is the prequel releases, and I know we're going to talk about these a bit more later, but this is where I got my family involved in the texting memory verification of this, because I was talking with my sister, and my dad took us to see The Phantom Menace, which was a big deal at the time. Like, I've talked about this on the show. We lived 2.5 hours away from a movie theater. So we drove to see this release, and neither of us, I was texting her like, were you a Star Wars fan? Was I? And we landed on, we think our dad just wanted us to be part of a large cultural event that was happening. So that was that. In university, you're watching movies, you put it on, you see it, you're laughing, and then all of a sudden, I'm just like, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan, but not the kind that, like, I feel really like I can claim that, because I don't have the history with it. I don't know that I could answer all of like the trivia. I don't know. I feel like I couldn't pass gatekeeping of Star Wars fandom, which makes me reluctant to claim it. So I just kind of carve out my own areas of fandom, which is I like Leia a lot, and I would go to, when I saw the movies that were just released, these last 3, I'm blanking on even what they're called now, the sequel series.
Right. Yeah, there's sequel series.
You've got prequel and sequel.
Like Rise of the Skywalker. And
so I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm following the plots and everything, but I'm really into Poe's circle scarf game, because that adventure look with the circle scarf that he has, that was a good look. So, that's the kind of fan I am.
That's all right. Like, I mean, I don't think anybody needs to be like a hardcore fan to say that, you're a fan of the series. I do find that funny about kind of fandom in general. It's almost kind of like if you say that, you're a fan of something, depending on who you're with, like, or where you are, they could be like, oh, like, well, what do you think of this? And try and pull out some like obscure quote or question or character. And you don't need to always be proving you're a fan. Like, you can enjoy stuff and be a fan without being like hardcore about it, I think.
Absolutely. And I think, we could talk the whole episode just about the concept of like gatekeeping and, having to prove your fandom. I know, Holly, in the past when we've talked about gaming, you've come out around like people being like, well, I'm not a gamer, but... And they list off like the 5 types of games that they play, and you're like, you're a gamer, claim it, that's there. But it's almost, especially now at this point when there's just been so much more and more and more added into the universe of Star Wars, that there is a bit of a daunting element to getting into it. I almost think of it almost like a sports team, like if I was going to decide, okay, I'm going to be a fan of a professional sports team, I feel like I would almost have to like take a year to just immerse myself, study them, and then come out the other side being like, okay, I'm ready. I understand this. I have this. I'm ready to but again, I'm thinking of it like I have to prove something, and I don't know. I think I can let go. I can let go of that, but still, I think it's when we talked about doing the Star Wars episode, it's like that's great. I think we also should have someone who knows it. I didn't want to take that on, even though I have at this point in my life now seen movies several times. I know about the history of them. I can have opinions that are more than just Poe's excellent scarf situation. But yeah, it's when I'm hesitant to say I'm a Star Wars fan, it's not because of any kind of cultural associations with like, oh, is it cool or not cool? Is it nerdy or not? Like that type of thing. Like, yeah, no, it's just, I almost feel that my fandom is not enough in a way.
I gotcha. So what you're saying is like, if I was sick today, Holly texts you and is like, Caroline, I can't do the episode. What you're saying, Caroline, is you would not want to do this episode by yourself, correct?
Would that be doing it Han Solo?
Yes.
Oh. Well, I wouldn't want to do there are a couple layers to that. One of them being like, I don't think anyone needs to listen to like a 45 to 50 minute monologue of Caroline just like thinking thoughts.
I'd listen to that.
I would.
But no, if you had texted me and said like, oh, I'm sick, or I guess if Holly had said, yeah, we could have, and I think we would have had it would have been fine, right? Like, that's the other thing. Like, I'm not always sure who I think I'm trying to prove this to. The internet has the full spectrum of people who are, if you say like, oh, I just got into Star Wars and I'm really enjoying it, you'll get the people who say things like, oh, that's great, I love it, or so excited for you. And then you get the people who are like, well, I hope you started with the X print because that's the only official coding, like all of that.
Oh, yeah. It would be like, oh, well, actually, if you're starting to watch the whole series, what you want to do is start with episode 5, then go to episode 1, go episode 8. Like, yeah, there's all of that stuff. Just ignore it and just enjoy it. And
that's my thing. If I wanted to be, into Leia for a while, and so when I was doing that, I was reading and things, and it was the full spectrum of some of the books for kids, for adults, interviews online, official Star Wars stuff. But anyway, this is a lot from someone who's like, I don't know if I really am a fan, but I am. I would say yes, I am, and I'm still trying to figure out how to carve my fandom and talk about that and throw that in. So, Bryce, I'm curious to hear, when did you experience Star Wars?
Yeah, I don't remember like when I, just like everybody else here, I don't remember when I first watched like a Star Wars movie or anything like that. For me, Star Wars was always there. Like the first movie came out 2 years before I was born. So obviously I didn't have that, I didn't really experience that like everybody else did, like, you know, kids of the 70s did. But it's funny because like I'm pretty sure the first Star Wars movie I saw was Return of the Jedi. Yeah, I just remember the stuff with Jabba the Hutt and the Ewoks, thinking it was so cool. But like I was also a big fan of the Kenner toy line. So I had like a lot of the toys as a kid, and I probably had the toys more like I probably had the toys before I even watched my very first Star Wars movie. So what's really cool, all the toys too. I actually had like the Millennium Falcon and a bunch of the, obviously like the little figures like Yoda. And I really wish I still had my Millennium Falcon because it's worth a lot of money now. But regarding the Kenner toy line, actually, if you're not familiar with it, it's really interesting because like pretty much George Lucas became like a billionaire from the toy line. And it's a really cool story because basically he had just come off making American Graffiti in 1973, and that was like a big hit. And he was kind of pitching this space western around. So Fox was like, yeah, you know, we'll let you do the movie. But basically George Lucas was like, you know what? I will give up my directing fee. I will direct this for free, but I want to be able to keep the licensing and merchandising rights to myself. So at the time, Sci-Fi wasn't a big deal in the movies. They weren't huge hits or anything like that. So I think Fox is like, yeah, sure, we'll save us some money. This movie will come out, probably be a modest hit, and you know, it is what it is. Little did they know that, you know, that move ended up costing the studio billions of dollars, and George Lucas kind of raked in all that money himself. But yeah, kind of getting back to like my fandom, yeah, it's just been something I've always enjoyed. I wouldn't say I was like kind of like a hardcore fan and know all the obscure characters. Like I've seen all the movies. I haven't watched all the Disney Plus series, which I'm sure we'll get into here very shortly. But yeah, it's just a franchise I've always enjoyed. And I think my fandom of it, though, like I want to say it's almost kind of like waned a little bit over the years. Like maybe it's just me getting older, but obviously like my favorite trilogy, of course, is the original trilogy. And I know that's, you know, I'm not...
That's a hot take there, Bryce.
It is a hot take. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, and I think too... You know, we've seen probably over the years, like almost like maybe an oversaturation now of it. So, you know, you can kind of pick and choose like, oh, you know what? I heard that the Boba Fett series isn't that great. So maybe I'll skip that. Like, it doesn't seem like as big of an event as it was before, where, you know, it would take years before we would get the next movie or whatever. So, but yeah, I still in general enjoy it. And, you know, as a fan of pop culture, it's hard not to enjoy Star Wars.
You mentioned, Bryce, that one of the reasons we're talking about this is because Darth Vader was the winner of the March Madness Best Villain Tournament. Why do you think he took the win? Were you surprised? Holly, I'll start with you.
I was not surprised. I thought that Darth Vader was a really strong possibility. Actually, in my department, DI, we print out brackets and like have a competition inside the department to see who wins. And I didn't win. I chose Mr. Burns because I was thinking like, you know, I was trying to put myself in the Overdue Finds mindset, and I was thinking what would be a winner, and so I chose Mr. Burns. But I had Darth Vader going pretty far as well, and I'm not surprised. Like, I think Darth Vader is a really, really iconic villain, and I think there's a few things to it. There's like the relentless pursuit, like he's always just a couple of steps behind you. There's like the amazing costume design. You know, you mentioned Poe's scarf, Caroline, but like Darth Vader like really wears a cape, and
oh yes,
yeah, like just really amazing design for the costume. The voice acting by James Earl Jones is like so unmistakable and powerful. And then I think for Darth Vader, like I think a lot of good villains, and I you know, this kind of reminds me of your villains episode a little bit, but like I think a lot of good villains, like they really represent some kind of a core conflict that's very common. And I feel like with Darth Vader, it's like, you know, you have this person who's trying to, I guess, I don't know what, bring order to the galaxy. Like, is that his goal? But he's doing it in like very evil ways. But then there's always this like, you know, there's always this possibility of changing for the better. And this tension around like, will this person decide to do something differently and decide to, you know, make more good choices, and there's this like really great redemption arc in his story as well. So I think that those are reasons to me why Darth Vader is like such a great and iconic villain, and the clear winner of the Overdue Finds March Madness tournament.
I have all of those pieces in my notes here, Holly, about why I think he's endured or has become this like kind of iconic victim villain. And
poor Darth Vader.
Yeah, and as you said, the costume, the voice, everything about it. But I would also add the music. You know, that Imperial March, the John Williams score of like having a villainous theme song almost like that. That really, I think, takes it over the top. And Bryce, as I alluded to, we had a moment where we debated whether or not to if Darth Vader was the right choice to have in March Madness.
Yeah, this kind of this is classic Bryce of overthinking things. And because originally, like, you know, when we kind of create our lists, we each kind of do up who we think should be included. And for me, I did have another Star Wars villain, but not Darth Vader. I had Emperor Palpatine as I'm like, this is the main villain right here of Star Wars. And technically it is, but obviously Darth Vader, kind of as Holly talked about already, is too iconic. And, you know, I think you could go anywhere in the world, show a picture of Darth Vader, and everybody knows who that is. And I think too, you know, with I think maybe the reason why I was like, well, maybe we don't include Darth Vader was because, you know, I thought about, you know, at the end of Return of the Jedi, and he does have this like redeeming arc about him, and kind of comes full circle and everything. So, but once again, I was completely overthinking things, you know, but if you go back to, you know, the prequels with Hayden Christensen playing Anakin Skywalker in episodes 2 and 3, kills those little Jedi kids. And, you know, he's an evil character. So, I mean, out of, you know, the first 6 movies of the series, like, he's a bad dude. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it totally made sense, you know, after Caroline, you talked me off the ledge there, and we're like, Bryce, give your head a shake. Come on, it's got to be Darth Vader. So, yeah, obviously, it made sense to include him. And, yeah, I wasn't surprised at all, actually. And Caroline, me and you both kind of made our picks, and Darth Vader was my pick to win. I just kind of figured that, you know, with the Star Wars fandom and everything, that was going to be the character to win it all anyway. But especially too with Darth Vader, you also have him popping up in Star Wars Rogue One. He's just so, you know, like you said, the music, the cape, which normally, you know, if you saw a guy walking down the street with a cape, you'd laugh, but something about that cape and Darth Vader, it makes him definitely very, very scary.
We should maybe have some kind of like Darth Vader versus Lando cape off something, because Lando can also rock a cape. That's For sure. I don't see, this is like, are all of my Star Wars thoughts fashion related? No, but a lot of them are.
The pose off at Cloud City. That's
right.
That's what Caroline wanted to see.
It's hard to go against Billy D. Williams. So it's, yeah. Did you have any, were you surprised though, Caroline, to see Darth Vader win, or not really?
No, I think he's kind of become almost a placeholder for like a villain character in the minds of understanding it. And even, you know, going back to me at that sports day at leadership camp, I hadn't seen it, but I knew who Darth Vader was. I knew what kind of his story was, not the specific ins and outs of it, but, you know, what he was representing. So, I think it makes sense. And I think it's been a constant presence as well. Even with, since I would say probably, 97, with the re-release of it, Star Wars has had a pretty consistent place in popular culture, of both that re-releasing and the new things that have been created.
So, in addition to the movies, there's also a number of other Star Wars stories. So in books, TV shows, games, and of course, I love pop culture merchandise, so merch. Holly, do you have any favorites? And I know today you gave us a preview before we hit record. And you got something there with you today.
Yeah, I do. I did. I looked I have some retro video games in my collection. And, you know, I'm just going to shout out my brother here because he's a huge fan of kind of retro video gaming as well. And I think this was actually a gift from him more recently, but I do have a copy of Super Return of the Jedi, which is an impossible game by THQ for the Super Nintendo. I didn't show you this before, but I also have a copy of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer from the Game Boy, which was one that I remember this game for Nintendo 64, and I'm pretty sure that Robin and I rented this a number of times from Movie World. Shout out Movie World in Stony Plain, still going today, a blockbuster-like experience. So yeah, many games like and I read some of the books too, and definitely had toys and stuff. But I'd say video gaming is a big way that I've interacted with the series, and I think, you know, Star Wars Rebellion is a turn-based game from a long time ago that we spent a lot of time on. X-Wing Alliance and Battlefront are a little bit more recent titles. One that I really wanted to highlight today is in thinking about this question is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and it's a more recent adventure game that came out in 2019, and it's got like a really great story. It follows this like, I guess, emerging Jedi named Cal Kestis and his droid companion BD-1, because of course you always have a droid companion. And it's a really great game. It's got a really good story, and there's just kind of like little hints of, you know, some of the bigger characters from the main franchise series in the game. And the game itself is kind of, this is actually not a style of game that I usually play, and it's so interesting that we talked about like gatekeeping and gaming and stuff earlier. Like the Souls games, the Dark Souls games, they have a reputation of being quite hard, and there's kind of a reputation of people maybe not being made to feel welcome if they don't like games where the difficulty is really intense. And I started playing Fallen Order before I realized that it was a Souls-like game, but it's actually set up in a way where it is quite accessible, and it has a lot of difficulty settings, and I found it like quite easy to get into and just enthralling because of the setting and the story. So it's a really good one, and I think we have a lot of copies of it in the collection. Oh, and there's a sequel to it coming out this week, actually. So by the time this episode, I think, is out, it'll be out there. It's Jedi Survivor, I think is what it's called. So yeah. Yeah,
I just saw the review of it the other day. I think IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a great game. And I'm not sure if we have it in our collection yet, but go search for it and put your name down for a hold for sure.
Yeah, and this is like a great time to check out Fallen Order because, yeah, again, it's a really great game, and it's one of those games where it puts me into this loop where I play the game and then I'm like, the music is there from the movie and I'm like, oh, I gotta watch the movie again. So then I watch the movie and then I'm like, oh, I gotta play the game some more. And then I go and I play the game, and then it just like I keep on I'm stuck in this loop for sometimes months, sometimes years. So anyways, maybe I'll get out sometime.
In addition to the games, have you watched like Mandalorian or any of the Disney Plus series at all?
Yeah, I've watched Mandalorian and I've watched Andor, and I haven't really watched the other ones so far. I heard that they're like maybe not quite as well put together in total, but I really liked the first couple of seasons of Mandalorian, or like the first season for sure. But I love Andor. It's so good. And it's like a really taut political thriller. And you know, it's written by a couple of the episodes are written actually by one of the main writers for House of Cards. And it's like so good and so dramatic. And it really it kind of follows Cassian Andor, and he's a character who kind of comes about in the Rogue One movie, and that movie kind of comes about just with an offhanded comment out of one of the original movies. I can't remember exactly which one. It might have been A New Hope with Mon Mothma, but and she's a character in Andor too, and her story is so interesting. So really great performances. Andor is like, I think I jokingly said in the email to you that it's like a prestige drama masquerading as a Star Wars property. And I really believe that. And it's so good. Like I think the next season is coming out in 2024 sometime. And I definitely plan to rewatch it before then, because it's just so great. And it really kind of looks at these individuals. This is a theme that I love in Star Wars, and this is like one of the main types of stories that I like, is when you have regular folks who are just kind of like caught up and mixed up in a big political moment of change. And I think that the series does that so well. And so yeah, it's great.
So obviously you're a big fan of the Rogue One movie then?
Yeah, I really like the Rogue One movie as well. And I think it's a really great, you know, I think there's been a lot said about the adaptation and the sequels and the prequels. But I think what I love about Rogue One is that, again, they're taking this one line from one of the original movies and they're exploring it out into this whole story, this adventure story with these characters. And one of the things that I think is so great about that is an approach for adaptation or for making a sequel or a prequel, is that it makes the universe feel bigger. And Star Wars is such an interesting place as a universe. Like, it's so gritty. The robots are so cute. The droids, you know, the different planets have so much character. And I love spending time in those different places. And I think that that's something that Rogue One does really well, is it creates this like very cohesive little bubble that makes the universe feel bigger.
Caroline, how about you? Mm-hmm. You enjoy the movies and the series, but was there anything else about it? Like, are you a fan of Baby Yoda? Is there anything else about the series that you like?
I cannot describe to you just how adorable I find Baby Yoda. Like, words do not exist. I love it. Whatever they have like zeroed in on for maximum appeal, it is working for me. And one of the things, I think I put this partly on Baby Yoda. I put it partly on the pandemic. But one of my pandemic purchases was a Baby Yoda Chia Pet. And that just brought me so much joy. And you know, maybe I'll share a picture if I can find one of my total life gardening experience of Baby Yoda coming together there. But one of the things I think I've talked a bit about this on the show in the past, I also like the nonfiction world. And so Star Wars as cultural thing is another kind of area that I like to explore about it. Carrie Fisher's memoirs, but especially The Princess Diarist, which came out just weeks before she died. It is such a weird book that talks about her relationship with Harrison Ford specifically, and then the second half of it just like goes into this like real person fiction that she creates about like the life they could have had together, and but there's distance, but then you can tell sometimes she's just right there in that moment, and then she died, and then it is a very interesting kind of like cultural thing that I think as the years go on will continue to be part of it. John Williams' music, as I talked about, like just experiencing that and listening to how it's crafted, it's created, the characters having different scores. I mean, in the trailers for the sequel series, whenever they use the music so effectively to get at what they wanted to in that. And then the documentary Elstree 1976, which is available at EPL through Canopy. You can stream it at home. But this is a documentary about kind of like the bit and background players of Star Wars, people who played stormtroopers or were in the backgrounds of scenes, had like one line or the process of how they got involved with it, the legacy of it, the infighting, because I mean, people, like there's multiple people claiming to be very specific stormtroopers, and because they are, masked and have this helmet on, there's not really a definitive answer for some of them. The hierarchy of like extras for like the ones who are kind of visible, the ones who have a line, the ones who have a character name, just very, very interesting. And then when you think of how Star Wars kind of spun into like fan and conventions and all of this, and how, someone who was an extra in a movie, in 1970, filming in 1976, it was able to turn that into a very lucrative role by saying, yes, this is me in the corner of this picture. So that's it. And in terms of other products, I do have, and this was another impulse purchase. This one was pre-pandemic, but I think it was when I was going through that Leia thing that I talked about earlier. I saw it's a tiny little plastic toy, I guess, of Han Solo on I think they're wampas, those like the camel-like things on the ice on Hoth. Anyway, and he's in his Hoth gear, and I have it posed so when he like rears it back, and his line with like, "Then I'll see you in hell," which just is like such a good that's Harrison Ford in that moment, so good. And I have that on one of my bookshelves, and this is I have it next to my figure skating books because Hoth is an ice planet. So that's kind of bringing it all together. Yeah. Bryce, did you play any Star Wars games?
I did. And like Holly, I actually still have my copy, and I should have brought it to show, well, I was going to say everybody, but the both of you, because anybody listening to this wouldn't be able to see anyone.
You can tweet it out. When we release the episode, you can tweet it out.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. But I still have my copy for the Super Nintendo Super Star Wars, and as Holly mentioned, these games are impossible. And I shared this story with both of you already, but I remember we got it for Christmas, and it's a great game. And we actually did end up like beating the game, which is one of my greatest gaming accomplishments ever. But I remember we got to a certain point on the very end level where you're in like the Death Star and you have to take like certain turns and everything. And my brother Jeremy and I, like, we could not beat this thing. And so we had this idea of like, we're playing it and we're like, maybe if we like go watch the movie again, maybe there's something there that we're missing from this 1977 movie that'll help us beat this game that was released in 1993. So, of course, we rented it. And, of course, there was nothing there that helped us beat the level. But we eventually did beat the game. So, yeah, the Super Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi games, they're impossible. But they're still fun to play if you can get a copy of one. And also, too, speaking of video games, I've mentioned this before on the show, but the Lego Star Wars games are so fun. They're kind of aimed at families, so you can be of any gaming level. If if it's been 20 years since you've picked up a controller, this is a game that anybody can play. There's great humor in the game, and pretty much all of the Lego games are like this. It's, kind of pokes fun at maybe some questionable plot points in the movie too, and it's great anyway. So check those out. And also too, as we've kind of talked about, I haven't watched the latest season of Mandalorian yet. I've heard iffy things about it, so I'll eventually watch it. But I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, and Rogue One is great. I would put Rogue One up there as one of the best Star Wars movies. Maybe top 3 or 4 for me anyway. And by the way, because a lot of people, and I think this had to do with like the new sequel series, a lot of people weren't fans, or they didn't maybe watch Solo, the Han Solo spin-off movie. That's actually an underrated Star Wars movie. I thought it was so fun, and I can't remember the actor's name who plays Han Solo in it, but obviously it must have been so stressful trying to step into the shoes of Harrison Ford in such an iconic role. But give it a shot. I mean, I'm pretty sure we have it in our collection, and if not, you can obviously just watch it on Disney Plus. And as a kid, nothing was funnier than the movie Spaceballs. So, of course, the Mel Brooks send up of the Star Wars movies. To me, Pizza the Hut was like the most hilarious thing I'd ever seen when I was like 10 years old. So we do have Spaceballs in our collection. And there's so many different things with Star Wars that you can enjoy. So yeah. My
last question was going to be, why do you think Star Wars has endured all these years? But I think that kind of nails it right there.
Yeah, it's kind of both yourself and Holly mentioned, like it's always been there. And really, they did seem like in 97 when they re-released those the original trilogy in theaters with all of the extra footage added, which that's a whole other episode in itself, which I'm not a fan of. But it's been able to stay relevant. All these, like you said, books. There was books in the 80s that are still being made, being published today. TV series, merchandise, just everything. And it's I think as long as Earth is around, there will be Star Wars stories. Like I don't think the franchise is going anywhere.
I think to your point earlier, Caroline, the music is so amazing, and I think that the music itself like tells such a great story, and it really pulls you in. And I think that is maybe not the whole story, but I think that is a really interesting aspect of like maybe why this is so successful and so compelling is great music and a great score.
I think as well, the actors, particularly the actors from the original trilogy. You mentioned Harrison Ford. I talked about Carrie Fisher. Mark Hamill has, become. I'm not really sure at what point he made this decision, but he's embraced Star Wars. He now is a prolific social media guy, and he embraces his kind of this legacy that he has. And I think, when you think of him as kind of like that wide-eyed young kid, and just the actors at that point in their career, and then, you know, still being people we talk about today. I think the actors as well have a part in that enduring piece of it.
And let's not forget with Mark Hamill too, his turn as himself on The Simpsons, where Homer has to rescue him from the Sci-Fi connection.
Oh my goodness.
Or Sci-Fi convention.
Luke be a Jedi tonight. That song it is so good. I sing that one a lot.
Great episode.
Before we get to our roundtable questions, Bryce, can you let our listeners know what is coming up on our next episode?
Did you know that the very first Garfield comic strip was published on June 19th, 1978? Yes, Garfield officially turns 45 this year. So on the next episode of Overdue Finds, we'll be taking a look back at the iconic comic strip, its importance in the library world, and some of the legendary TV specials. And, of course, we got to talk about lasagna, too, for chatting Garfield.
Absolutely.
And a quick little peek behind the scenes of Overdue Finds. We will reach out to staff and be like, hey, we're doing these episodes. Is anybody interested? Do you want to come on and talk about this stuff? So we sent a note out about, you know, some upcoming episodes, and one of them was Garfield. The amount of people who wanted to come on the Garfield episode and the people excited about it was nuts.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to talk about Garfield. I thought that was one where it was like nobody would want to come on for it. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, I have started some research for that episode, and I just don't know what to say. It's going to be a good one. I can tell you that. So our roundtable questions. First one, finally, 2 longtime roundtable staples coming together at last: quizzes and road trips. I sent you both a Star Wars quiz from StarWars.com. Which Star Wars alien should be your summer road trip buddy? Holly?
Well, the quiz told me that Grogu, or Baby Yoda as we've been calling him, should be my road trip companion. And I think, you know, that I think there's some validity to that. You know, Grogu's very cute, like very kind of mischievous. I think we get along in that sense. However, I wanted to go for like a real deep cut answer on this one. And so my choice is Cy Snoodles, who is the singer from the infamous Jabba's barge scene in Return of the Jedi. And what I'm imagining is a Blues Brothers style musical adventure where Cy and I are teaming up and we're putting the band back together after the tragic events of the barge in Return of the Jedi. So we're finding our way to, you know, re-recruit the Blue Velvet Elephant, Max Rebo, the Ortolan horn section, and one by one through a series of gritty adventures. I don't know. I think maybe we're working together to put on a benefit concert, maybe for some Jedi who survived Order 66 at a Jedi temple or something. So that's what I'm imagining would be my road trip adventure.
I only understood maybe like 1 in 5 words that you just said, but I want this to happen so badly. I want this.
I think it's worth saying, Caroline, that I have no musical talent or ability whatsoever. So this is a real, like, blue sky pitch.
The blue elephant guy was the first character to pop in my mind when you mentioned that.
Bryce, who's your road trip companion?
So I got Wicket. The Ewok, from Return of the Jedi. So the description said, with a taste for snacks and a heart for adventure, Wicket the Ewok is for you. His stature means he fits easily on the back of a speeding motorbike or simply in the passenger seat, but his feet might be a little too short to reach the pedals for driving. So obviously we wouldn't be on motorcycle. We'd be in a SUV or something like that. But yeah, Wicket would be fun.
Mine, I will be traveling with Jar Jar. And at first,
sorry to hear that.
I was like, what? But then I read the description, and Jar Jar is exactly the kind of friend who will take silly photos with you and encourage you to try new foods and experiences. And so I was thinking, because I love nothing more than taking pictures by giant roadside attractions, and I don't know that all of the aliens would be down for that. So I think there might be some truth to this epic Jar Jar Caroline road trip.
I like it.
Yeah.
I love that for you, Caroline.
Yeah. I think there's some potential. Okay, second question. What minor Star Wars character would you like to see get their own starring role? Holly.
This was a really tough one because I think my reflex answer for this is the Rancor Keeper. His moment of emotion and pathos as the Rancor succumbs after, battling Luke Skywalker. However, I feel like the Rancor Keeper actually has a short story in a book from maybe the 90s about Jabba's palace. My brothers told me about this before. I've never had a chance to read it. So I think I'm going to go with, always in the background, but what's their deal? The Gonk droid. This, mysterious garbage can shaped character, I think is waiting for that spotlight moment to finally reveal, like, what's their story? Why do they keep showing up everywhere? How did they, get from the Jedi base on one planet to, Jabba's palace on another planet? Lots of questions about the Gonk droid. Not a lot of answers in the Star Wars universe. So that's my answer.
Holly, the Rancor Keeper was almost my pick. Like, I was like Googling his name, and while I was doing that, I was like, no, this would be so much better. It's very similar to your answer for the road trip, Holly, but I would like to see a show or a movie on the Cantina Band. So they actually have a name, and they are Figrin Dan and the Modal Nodes. So yeah, I would love to see. I think they would work better as a TV show. Basically, similar to Holly's, it would be a road trip show about them basically playing various gigs throughout the universe. So it also made me think too, and I forgot to mention this with the other kind of Star Wars media that we might enjoy. The Family Guy Star Wars spoofs are so well done, but there's a really funny part too with the Cantina Band where they have to stop playing, and then the Cantina Band's like, "Oh, we're taking requests," and what's that? Somebody said for the Cantina Band song again, and then of course they just keep playing the same song over and over again. So if you get a chance to check out the Family Guy Star Wars spoofs, they're really good. Caroline, who did you pick?
I went with the Cantina Band, but I think now I might want to change my answer and have that be a character that probably exists. Hopefully someone can tell me if it does, but the person responsible for getting the looks for Lando. I want Lando's stylist, the Cloud City decorating team. I want maybe a reality type show on just the ins of the in-world experience of creating that fine setup. So like the huts are coming in next week. Yeah,
it's going to be chaos. Did we get the damage deposit from them?
Yeah,
so many possibilities.
That shot where they open the doors and Darth Vader's sitting there at the table. What else do they use that room for? I want to go behind the scenes and get all of this. Yeah.
I would love that show. I would. That would be the media event of the year.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Holly. I've so enjoyed our conversation about Star Wars. Is there anything coming up at EPL that you would like our listeners to know about?
Yeah, so there's a few things. We've been doing some woodworking and laser cutting trials in the Fab Lab. So keep an eye out for opportunities to take certification training to use those services. We've just launched serging recently, along with our sewing machines that are available in the Milner Makerspace. So that's another thing. We provide a little bit of safety training as people are getting started. Capital City Records, there's the Juno Legacy Collection that Rocky mentioned recently to watch for, as well as the return of the Snow Valley Patio series. And then because it's so on point, even though it was recently on Overdue Finds, I want to double down on the space app on EPL's wall. It's so amazing. It's beautiful. This 2-story tall, 40-foot wall. The space app has solid science. It's gorgeous. It's got sky stories. And also for, those classic Star Wars arcade combat simulator fans, take a close look at the cockpit of the little ship that you're flying in the space app. I think you're going to recognize it. It's pretty familiar. You can see that on epl.ca/wall to see when it's scheduled, and epl.ca/makerspace to see upcoming events in the makerspace.
It's really cool. I know that was basically what I said the whole episodes we did on space and the wall, but it just is really, really cool. So definitely go and check that out. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. More importantly, tell a friend about the show. Maybe you could listen while you're on that summer road trip.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in our show notes. And as always, we love to hear from our listeners. So you can email us at podcast@epl.ca. Both Caroline and myself get those emails, and we love hearing from listeners. You can also share your thoughts about the show with us on Twitter @epl.ca and by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.